So following playing the Disney Afternoon Collection a little while back, I figured I would dive in to check out DuckTales Remastered. So it's been a little while since I've played this, and somehow it's been 13 years since this release, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, to be honest. But you may not be aware of this one. This was actually made by WayForward, who are best known for the Shantae series, obviously published by Capcom. It was actually briefly delisted as well in 2019, but then brought back. Licensing issues did take that down temporarily, so it's nice to see that that got sorted out, because it's great to have this available for prosperity. But yeah, I figured, I really enjoyed the NES version of DuckTales. I felt it aged pretty well still, but I had played this like way back on the Xbox 360 when I had it, so I figured it had been a long time since I'd played it. This is actually being played backwards compatible by Xbox Series X, the sort of the Xbox 360 version of that, so that's the gameplay you're seeing on screen. As you can see, it still looks like a dream, right? This doesn't really feel like it's aged at all, and that's obviously massively down to the stunning art style, which is very reminiscent of that 1980s animated show. Which was, what the original game was based upon, but this really actually does feel like you're watching that cartoon, like you're sat, in your gym jams, as a kid, all over again. So it's amazing. And this was done by WayForward, so they're best known, as mentioned, for Shantae. So they did Seven Sirens, Risky's Revenge, Pirate's Curse. They also did a reimagining recently of Clock Tower and Contra, but they've also done games like Mighty Switch Force and things like that. So these folks really know how to make a good platform game, and what I think you'll find immediately when playing this one is, yes, it's labeled as a remaster. This is 100% a remake, because what they have done not only is obviously massively update the visuals to the point where they're much more current, and even 13 years on they still look pretty amazing, right? But also they've added in new levels, they've updated all the sprites, there's new boss patterns, there's difficulty levels, you can obviously unlock concept art, you can get different kind of musical soundtracks, you can even dive into Scrooge McDuck's vault and spit out gold as you could on the TV show, right? So I mean, this just kind of shows you what this game is all about. It's absolutely been made to, really restore of that 80s feel. But the best thing about this remake, and the coolest thing, is they even got back some of the voice cast, including Scrooge McDuck's original voice actor, Alan Young, who was 93 when he was recording this. Like, let that sink in for a minute. He recorded this when he was 93. He died 3 years later in 2016. And then, as you know, David Tennant took on that role more recently when they did the DuckTales reimagining. But yeah, this was like one of Alan Young's like final things he ever did, and he got to play Scrooge one last time. I mean, how cool is that? This is the original Scrooge McDuck voice actor that you had and you grew up with. So yeah, I mean, just for that alone, I feel like this remake is very, very special, because WayForward have obviously put a lot of time, a lot of energy into this. They've gone all the way back looking at the classic 8-bit sprites. They've reimagined them in a way that tried to make them feel authentic, but they've even added in new content. And obviously, I've mentioned, you will notice straight away this is a little bit chatty. that I think would be my one criticism of this, is that obviously the original game is a little bit mute. So when you're playing it, you kind of get thrown into it. You don't really know exactly why you're there or what you're doing. You kind of have an idea that Scrooge is just out for gold and money and fame and fortune, yada yada. But I mean, this kind of really explains the context behind that. So it brings in the subcast of characters, more like Launchpad and the nephews and Webby. But equally still, you still get some scene setting as well to help with that, and it's a great way for the voice actors to just almost recreate those roles again and be in that moment, and just you like you're watching an episode of DuckTales. It's really so cool. Absolutely, just on this alone, I for prosperity's sake, I mean, obviously I think that's the thing as well, like, I don't necessarily see this as trying to replace the NES original. I think in a way it's a complement to it, and it's a way for modern audiences who probably would really struggle to get into that 80s platforming NES style, and didn't grow up with it, can actually play a platformer and actually feels like, yeah, okay, I can take in all the story and then some, and feel more akin to, maybe the TV show that I grew up with. So that's super cool. But yeah, as mentioned, it's a little bit chatty. It's catering more to those classic animations. But like, for instance, at the beginning of the game, you see there's a full cutscene where the Beagle Boys are infiltrating Scrooge's vault and Scrooge's home. So you kind of get some context there as to why some of the gold is gone and why the security system's going haywire, and why Scrooge is deciding to go to all these extravagant places to try and find these jewels and gems. So you get a bit of backstory there. But what's interesting interesting as well, like when you start the levels, you also get some context for those as well. So like there's a little cutscene that kicks in before you go into the level. For instance, in Transylvania, if you remember, the nephews kind of, when you appear, they're just kind of kidnapped, right? You get a full little mini story in Transylvania before that to explain how they went missing and why. Not that, I mean, it's a strange one, right? Because you probably didn't need that context. You didn't need that added information. Like you could probably kind of infer it and work it out for yourself. But I think it's just nice to have. And again, I think it was just a way for the voice actors to do their thing. And that's super cool. But also to kind of make it feel more akin to that, you know, animated TV show, etc. And I think, you know, with modern gaming, as we've kind of already illustrated, you know, like there's more storytelling in those games, whereas back in the 80s and those NES platformers, it was just like the bare minimum, and then it's straight into the gameplay. It was all about just going straight into the gameplay, right? So we're more storytellers in gaming, I think, in this day and age. Even I say this day and age, this was still 13 years ago, which is still blowing my mind a little bit. But yes, you know, obviously, you know, you get the little cutscene, and then you can go to Transylvania, and you can go to the Amazon, and you can go to the moon. So you get all of that additional information before you go into the levels. But it is still very much that vintage. You know, Scrooge has got his pogo stick. Scrooge is using his pogo stick to bounce up and down and bounce on enemies' heads. You know, get treasure chests, get jewels, get cakes and sweets, and fight all sorts of enemies like spiders and gorillas and aliens and bats, whatever it might be, right? This was before the reimagining of DuckTales, so this is the not akin to that art style. This is the classic art style, which I'm kind of glad about, because I did like the new DuckTales inspired, but I grew up with this DuckTales that I'm playing right now, so this is just like right in my wheelhouse. This is perfect. And you know, playing this back, you know, it's such a shame in a way. Like I would have loved Way Forward to have had some time with other games. Like, you know, I would have loved them to have maybe brought back Quackshot. You know, I mentioned Quackshot on the channel before. I mean, that was another game that I grew up with on the Mega Drive, which was a gem. And I think, you know, this actually feels closer to Quackshot to me than the original DuckTales. It was more like, because there was more of a story in that Quackshot, and you know, you had to go through a certain part of the level to go through another section, and then you had to go back, so a little bit of backtracking. So there's a little bit of that in this DuckTales, and I think it's very much paying homage to Quackshot, so I would have loved to see what they could do with that. But even Castle of Illusion, right, I mean, if you may remember, there was also a Castle of Illusion remake, which wasn't quite as good. I actually wouldn't mind revisiting that, checking it out for the channel, because that has definitely been a while since I've played that. But, you know, I think Way Forward probably would have nailed that assignment too. I mean, they just got it. They just really got it with this one. You know, and again, you know, I think at the time it wasn't the most critically acclaimed game. I think, you know, people did criticize the length of it, and people criticized, again, as mentioned, the cutscenes and such. But I think, you know, I think it's one of those games where you look back historically and you think actually what they achieved here is incredible. Like, you know, it's still aged beautifully, it still plays seamlessly. You know, now knowing that information about the original voice actor of Scrooge and then his passing shortly after this, you know, and having that there for prosperity just adds a certain something special to this, I think, that wasn't maybe present for those reviewers. And length to me isn't really much of a big issue. It wasn't really much of an issue then, it's not really much of an issue now. It's paying homage to the game that was. It was a short game, but it was hard because it was really hard to get through those sections, but it's made easier. And there are 4 difficulties, so, you know, you can go easy, medium, hard, nightmare. So you can kind of build that difficulty up if you want to, and then by doing so earning more coins to unlock more things in the concept vault. But I think ultimately, you know, the whole idea of just it being short, it makes sense because the game has been made easier to some degree, but equally, you know, that's just what the game was, so it's staying true to the source material. So I don't think that was much of a big issue, to be honest. That being said, you know, I think there were some annoyances as well, like in the Amazon level, for instance, when you are, like, Scrooge is picking up these coins, which they're additional mechanic that's been added into this game, and every time Scrooge picks up a coin, the action stops and he's got to talk about this coin. And, like, I think the difference there was that, like, you know, they felt like they had to pause the action and they just kind of interrupted it, whereas in the NES version it's just seamless, right? Just play. So I think that does add a frustration. But it's interesting because there are also sections within this game where Scrooge is talking as you're playing, right? You didn't have to stop the action. You could just have had him just talking about it as you're walking around. So I think there's just some little things like that that just kind of are a bit jarring, and it does date it a little bit. And yeah, it is a bit short, of course, as mentioned, but I think, you know, like when you lower the difficulty down to the lowest settings, you're going to expect it to be a little bit on the easier side. Yeah, the unskippable cutscenes are a little bit frustrating, but then, you know, it all just gets brought back to the stunning visual upgrade that we have here. You know, the voice actors, the authenticity of the game, the vintage style, the levels have just been recreated in just wondrous way. I mean, Transylvania looks amazing, the moon looks incredible, the Amazon really just thrives now. It's beautiful. Like, and then you've got the enemies like the gorilla that you've just been so used to seeing in right at the beginning of the game, just looks so much different now. Even the snakes, it's super cool. And you know, it's just you can tell this has been made by fans of the show, fans of the game, you know, Disney, you know, aficionados. Like this was the perfect team to work on this game. And I cannot imagine if you said to any studio, like, who'd say, right, we want you to remake DuckTales on the NES, I can't imagine a better version of this. Like, I mean, if you forget the unskippable cutscenes for a second, if you maybe could just skip through those or, you know, make it a bit more seamless. Other than that, I cannot imagine a better way to do this. It's incredible. I would massively recommend it if you've never got to try it. It's probably the best way. You know, if you played the Disney Afternoon Collection, got a little bit frustrated by how DuckTales is that very vintage NES style, and you know, it's a little bit too harsh, and the rewind states aren't really helping you too much. Grab this game. You will appreciate what was done all the more, I think, and it's definitely more akin to modern. It's more fair to modern audiences, and it's just beautiful to look at. I mean, there's just so many cool aspects to it that just, I think this game should be celebrated more and appreciated more. And I hope off the back of Disney Afternoon Collection out reintroducing DuckTales to people again, you know, maybe they'll check and seek this out, and they absolutely should. So I mentioned there's that kind of like little mini tutorial to explain the mechanics and such. There is also a final level on top of the original levels that you've got used to in DuckTales. So there's some cool content that's been added into this, even down to the music, right? So the music is actually done, the soundtrack, by the original. It's been remade by Jake Kaufman, who's done remix versions of the original iconic tunes, right? Was on the Wii U, but you know, obviously, you know, we know what happened there, but maybe an official Switch port might make its way around at some point. But yeah, I just figured I would dive into DuckTales Remastered because it's been a while. I really got the bug for it playing Disney Afternoon Collection, and yeah, it just reminds me how brilliant this was and how good Way Forward are. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll see more kind of remasters of this. I mean, I would love to see like Way Forward even work on like Aladdin or Lion King from those games back in the day, or maybe like World of Illusion if they can't do Castlevania, why not World of Illusion, you know, and or like maybe Fantasia, like I was joking about in my other video, or even The Little Mermaid. Ooh, don't know about that so much, but you know, it's great to have it here, and I think, you know, this Disney Afternoon Collection, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. Oh my god, how did I even not think about that? That'd be so cool. Anyway, this has been the DuckTales Remastered, which I technically think is more of a remake. This is now available. You can definitely find this on Steam and Xbox, and you definitely should check it out because it's a gem, and I think it's a gem that even 13 years on still holds up really, really well. And it looks great and it plays great, and this is the best way to play DuckTales outside of Disney Afternoon Collection. I mean, obviously the original, as I say, is always the best, but I think the original may definitely off-put some people, so if you were one of those people, check this out instead. Thank you all for the subscribes, likes and views. I really appreciate it, and yeah, catch you for the next one.